Felix Abraham Wordsworth. He is in the drama program, he's a peer facilitator, and he is a co-editor of the school paper. And this will go to Commissioner Brian Parker to start with.
As voters think about this election, one of the main issues they are considering is the issue of crime. Oakland has consistently ranked 3rd or 4th on Forbes magazine's list of most dangerous cities in the United States. Under Mayor Kwan, we saw some downward trends in the second half of her term, with an 18% drop in murders, a 35% drop in shootings, and a 47% drop in robberies compared to last year, according to a May article from the San Francisco Chronicles. That being said, crime is still a prominent issue. So, please tell me, how do you plan to work with the police department and the citizens to combat crime in Oakland?
Thank you for the question, and I think that we have to look inside the statistics. I think the young man was correct in terms of year over year. But let's look at these statistics over 5-year periods and over 10-year periods. We're coming off of artificial highs, so it would be hard to imagine that our crime could get any worse. I think coming back to what you said, crime is still an issue for everybody. If you look at what I said in the opening about the 2 cities, and I said we were unequal on education and on economic opportunities, but where we're very equal is crime. Your head of school talked about a 4 a.m. call on one of our citizens being murdered. I've already gotten that call in my life. I was 29 years old when we got a call that my sister had been murdered. And I had to stand up and do something about that then. We brought justice, but I knew that doing that one at a time wasn't the right way to serve bigger society. I'll take one more minute. If we look at this, we have to say, how do we have change at structure? I became of age out in New York, and there was a guy named Jeffrey Canada that was running the Harlem Children's Zone. And what he looked at and he said was there were 19 students going for every 1 spot. He said, we have to do something about this. And so too do we have to do something about this, but we have to change the conditions that go into our young people being murdered, and that goes into feeding education and feeding economics. I think that the practical number is 800 officers. Number 2, community policing. We only have about 12% of the police that come from Oakland. We clearly have to get that up. I think Councilmember Kaplan and I are united on trying to get to a goal of 50%. Cleaning up our neighborhoods, including the graffiti and the blight. I've talked about education. I've talked about economics. I think we can use technology to deploy our police in a better fashion. That becomes part of the solution. And managing the police department that has been under a settlement agreement for a decade. We've got to get back control of our police department, which we are close to doing. We've got to stop the record number of attritions that are going on, because when we add 80 officers and we lose 60 out of the bottom, that is a bad investment, and that's not good leadership. That will change under my regime. And accountability. We will show you the numbers of how we're getting safer so that we're not playing games with statistics. Thank you.
The courtesy minute can either be used to extend their time 1 minute when they're already speaking, that's fine, or when all the speakers are done, they can invoke that minute after everyone has spoken to stand and speak for 1 minute. We will now hear from Councilmember Libby Schaaf.
As someone who's lived in Oakland all my life, I am tired of people asking me whether or not I feel safe living in my city. And I reject the idea that crime should be some sort of urban tax you have to pay for living in what is otherwise an incredible city, Oakland. Oakland has no more excuses for this level of violence and this level of crime. Other cities have been safe, we can too. The cities of New York and Los Angeles have both reduced crime by more than 80%. For the past 2 years, I have had the top scholars, the top practitioners from around the country come to Oakland for my Safe Oakland Speaker Series. I have studied what has worked in these cities, and I know what we can implement from these other cities for Oakland to improve our level of safety, to improve not just the number of police, because that is critical, but the type of policing. These cities have been successful because they do data analysis, they do predictive policing, they do proactive policing. They create the type of deployment where people make the decision to not commit crime in the first place, rather than just running from 911 call to 911 call after the fact. I have been incredibly successful in the City Council to lead the effort to unfreeze police hiring, to speed up the hiring of new police officers, to hire civilian employees, which are part of investigations and support in the field, much more cost effective and much faster to get on the ground, as well as partnering with other law enforcement agencies. And I'll just say that I bring a holistic vision to crime. It's also successful intervention and prevention programs, as well as addressing the root causes of crime. For me, that's jobs, wages, and better educational outcomes for all of Oakland's kids. Thank you.
We will now hear from Professor Joseph Tuman.
Again, I'm going to ask you to think about the record. Councilmember Schaaf just told you that she supported efforts to increase the staffing. Yet when she and the rest of the City Council put forward ballot measure Z, which I'm going to support because I don't want to lose funding for 50 police officers, the city only committed to pay for 678 officers in the language of that, knowing full well that 60 of those positions are funded currently either by Measure Y, the current parcel tax that we do, or by federal grants, which means they only really committed to 618. Now, is that leadership on this issue? The mayor's own expert gave the number 900 that I quoted to you before. That's Bill Bratton, the commissioner of police, the person that she paid our tax dollars to give advice about how we should fix the department. Is this leadership? And Libby's right, and the others are right too. Police aren't the only answer to this. But since your question was about police, let me just deal with that real quickly. We need to staff to 900. Why? Because we need more patrol officers. Why? We have to get them out of their cars. When you have limited staffing, they stay in their vehicles, they work longer hours, they aren't as crisp. Community policing cannot work if you don't have enough police officers. For those of you who drive, when you're on the highway, what do you do when you see a CHP? You slow down. It's no different on the streets of Oakland. If you don't have enough police officers and they can't project themselves everywhere and you don't see them, eventually, if you're a desperate person, you will devolve to your own self-interest. Staffing up is not about hurting people or creating a police state. It is about encouraging people to make good choices and discouraging people from making bad choices.
Council Member Rebecca Kaplan.
So one of the things that I think is really important to do when solving problems is to be willing to look at what has and has not worked. And Oakland 4 years ago had over 800 police officers and had deployment to beats. We had officers who walked around, who talked to people, and who had a visible presence, so somebody looking for a good place to get away with a home invasion robbery or a mugging would think twice, because they would see that we had patrols. The other advantage to that is the neighborhood gets to know the police officer, and the police officer gets to know the neighborhood. So you strengthen trust, reduce misconduct problems, and build the kind of bonds that allow us to solve crime. We should never have gotten rid of those numbers and that system, and we must restore it as quickly as possible. Now that includes, you know, when you're filling a bucket and it has a leak at the bottom, it doesn't get full very well. So many police have been quitting and leaving. That's part of why the challenge Councilmember Schaaf talked about, that the numbers aren't going up as fast as they're supposed to. And that's part of why I've been working to improve police morale with some real nuts and bolts things. They've been complaining that their radios malfunction. Do you know how scary it is to be a cop on an emergency call and your radio malfunctions and you can't call for backup? So I was proud to introduce the item of council so that we are now fixing that and getting them radios that work. We also need to expand homebuyer assistance for our police and make sure we're restoring morale so that people stay in Oakland for the long term and help improve our public safety. Thank you.
The last answer on this important question comes to Mayor Jean Quan.
So when I started, I talked about coming in with a $58 million deficit, and Mayor Dellums had just laid off 80 officers. We're down about 700 employees citywide from the recession and cutting and cutting. So there's nobody up here is mean and doesn't want to hire more police, that doesn't want to hire more people. But the question is how many police to how many other services. So when I walked in, the police and fire was 75% of the entire budget. You had 16% debt. That left 10% to run the entire city. So until I negotiated the police to pay into their pensions, which are very rich pensions, and then go to lower pensions in future groups of police officers, we couldn't actually really afford to hire many more police, but we were able to do that. I called back those officers. I have had one academy after another to get the number of police up, but it's not just the number, it's who we've hired. For the first time, more than 50% of the police officers are people of color. For the first time, 1 out of 5 is a woman. For the first time, many of our officers speak a second language like the city. And that's part of the difference, that those younger and newer officers have a better relationship, because we also took the Bratton recommendation to assign people geographically so we could hold them accountable. So it is how we police, not just the number of police. And it is programs like Ceasefire, which I had to take out of my own mayor's budget because I knew it would make a difference to get young people out of probation, not to continue to be violent and not to go back immediately to jail. It has made a real difference, and look at the real stats. And I'm going to take my extra minute here. When I became a school board member, the first year, there were 170 murders in Oakland in the middle of the crack epidemic, before some of you were probably in kindergarten at that time. The last year that Jerry Brown was mayor, we had 148 murders. So don't tell me we're going to end up probably in the 70s this year. That doesn't make a difference, 70 lives. The homicides are down, and many of the other crimes in the city are beginning to come down, because we're not just policing better, but we're also providing economic opportunity. These billion-dollar projects that I brought into town are not just about the jobs, and unemployment is down by 50%, but it's about giving young people hope. And the School to Career and the schooling programs I hope to work in my second term, I think will bring them down for good, because that does give people hope and that does make a difference.
Councilmember Schaaf is invoking her minute.
I'm invoking my minute. I just want to correct some misperceptions, some misrepresentations that I feel like I've just heard in some of the answers. First of all, Councilmember Kaplan, you did not sponsor the item on radios. I wrote the motion for that, and also identified $7 million of proposed unnecessary spending so that the switch to a new radio system could be cost neutral for the city of Oakland. And Professor Tooman, my policy paper, and I invite you all, a lot of us have written detailed policy papers, so for your intellectual curiosity, go to our websites and read them. Mine is libbyformayor.com, and you will see that my goal for staffing for the Oakland Police Department is 925 officers, which is actually the current strategic plan for the city. The most important misperception that I really want to correct is around Measure Z, because I really hope that you all vote for it tomorrow. Measure Z would continue a tax that is already being paid, and it would help us not roll back public safety efforts. Now, there is a correction, and I fought for it, because the previous Measure Y, I can't explain it, my time is up, really misled voters. I am proud that Measure Z has a real staffing guarantee that is not deceptive and should be supported tomorrow.
Thank you. The next question will have 1 minute of response time. It will go first to Mayor Jean Quan. It is being read by Megan Baus. Megan is a senior. She is captain of the tennis team. She works with Youth Radio in downtown Oakland, and she also is the co-editor of the school paper.
According to an April SF Gate article, Oakland's public school system is currently seeing steady progress in graduation rates, with a 4% increase in the last year. Despite this upward trend, the Oakland Unified School District still faces the challenge of offering equal and widespread opportunities to students across the city. So, there is still an over 30% dropout rate for African American and Latino students in Oakland. Within the parameters of the powers of the mayor's office, what do you plan on doing to help Oakland's underperforming schools reach statewide and national levels?
Youth Radio is partly funded by Measure Z too. As mayor, and when I was the president of the school board, I was on Elihu Harris's education cabinet. So I've created a cabinet to bring together resources to help the schools. Two of the main things in terms of your question that I've really been working on is I talked about having those 2,000 summer internships this year because I knew as a school board member, for many of these kids, it was the first time they were ever out of their neighborhood. They didn't even, people told me this summer they didn't even know those jobs existed. So linking up with the Workforce Investment Board, the community colleges and the high school, opportunities for kids to have internships and get jobs when they get out of high school is absolutely critical. On the national level, I have been the president of the Council of Urban Boards nationally, and I worked very closely with President Obama. I was one of 18 mayors who he called in to talk about what we could do about violence, and I've been working very closely with my brother's keeper and, quite frankly, Mayors Against the Illegal Guns. There are just too many guns in this city, and too many guns leads to really mindless homicides and shootings that should not be. Thank you.
Professor Joe Tooman.
Well, let me have the privilege this time of speaking as a person with the experience and the insider. I am a teacher. And I love it as a teacher, and for those of you who are teachers, I love getting advice. I'm sure the electeds don't like getting advice from me. I love it as a teacher when people who aren't in classrooms try and tell you what you should do differently in your schools. So let me give you my perspective about this as somebody who gets the kids from Oakland in our university. First, you asked about how we do something about that dropout rate. The school district right now has an initiative that is aimed at helping African Americans and African American males, but the resources they're putting into that is in high school. I can tell you the skills, the learning skills start to erode not in high school, but in third grade, in the middle of elementary school, and it continues into junior high school. If you're going to invest resources to do this, you start earlier. Second, if you want to make sure that kids never leave in the first place, invest in teacher development. When you have great high schools like Oakland Tech and you have academies, don't leave those programs dependent on one teacher. Create bench strength. Train more teachers so they can step in. And finally, invest in preschool education. Get the kids ready for both reading, writing, and math literacy before they start kindergarten so that those skill sets are ready to go.
Council Member Rebecca Kaplan.
It is absolutely essential that we provide every child in this city with access to a safe school and a quality education. Since the city government doesn't have direct control over the internal workings of the school, a big part of how we get there involves working together and supporting the needs of the school district. But it goes beyond that. We need to make sure that kids can safely get to school. In some of the most struggling schools, the kids worry about getting mugged on their way to and from school. The city has a responsibility to make sure it's safe around the school, that the kids can get to and from the school, that they can afford to get to school, which is part of why I fought for a free bus pass for all school students to be included in Measure BB. And we need to provide after-school programs to all of our young people, many of whom don't have family at home in the afternoon and need support with homework and with athletics and with job training. And we need to not push out students unfairly. And lastly, we need to strengthen teacher recruitment and retention to really build that positive environment in the schools. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Council Member Libby Schaaf.
As someone who gave up my career as an attorney to start the volunteer program for the Oakland Public Schools, who has served for years on the board of the Oakland Schools Foundation, and who founded Lighthouse Community Charter School in East Oakland, which was named California's best charter school last year, this is an issue of great passion for me. There are many things that the mayor can do. First of all, the city of Oakland runs Head Start, which is a free preschool program. Last year, 60% of OUSD kindergartners were not prepared for kindergarten, a huge indicator for literacy and school success. Only 15% of qualifying families got a seat in subsidized preschool. That has got to be expanded, and quality needs to be raised. Another area, internships. The Linked Learning Initiative depends on internships in businesses. A mayor can absolutely drive the private industry to provide those internships. Another thing, Oakland has the Children's Fund for the Oakland Fund for Children and Youth. We set aside 3% of our budget. That has got to go to effective out-of-school learning opportunities. Finally, a joint powers authority with the city, the county, and the school district, because this issue is bigger than a mayor's education cabinet. It's got to be owned by all three of those agencies. Thank you.
Commissioner Brian Parker.
I think thinking outside the box, this goes back to the issue of accountability. When people are saying, well, it's the mayor's job, it's the council's job, we got to work together in partnership and do something about our abysmal graduation and dropout rates. I think if we can partner correctly, we can get a lot of stuff done. We do need more money. I followed in the steps of Cory Booker, who advised my campaign from early on. And you remember that he got $100 million from Mark Zuckerberg. We have set about the same course of action, and we are on the doorsteps of a $25 million school grant and a $25 million food justice grant. We need money for food justice in our schools. We need money for mental health for many kids that come to us traumatized with PTSD from violence that they're observing, job training. I would invest in tech and innovation, and then this question goes to the Black and Latino male achievement gap. This is a fundamental question of equity, and the former president and CEO of the NAACP, Ben Jealous, endorsed my candidacy and said, this is the kind of equity that I'll bring to all our students in all neighborhoods. That's the important part.
I'm told that we now need to move to the closing statements because already an hour has passed almost. So we will, for the two candidates who did not use their minute, Mayor Jean Quan and Councilmember Rebecca Kaplan, you can use that as part of your final statement. So we will begin with Councilmember Libby Schaaf with a minute and a half for your closing statement.
All right, there's no question that goes with the closing statement. So again, I'm Libby Schaaf, very proud to be born and raised in the city of Oakland and very excited about being the mayor of my hometown. And we see an incredible moment in time for Oakland. Oakland has opportunity, prosperity, and growth knocking at its door. And frequently in the past, we have not let that in. So I'm excited, and from helping then Mayor Jerry Brown, execute that successful 10K initiative, I know how to invite development and prosperity. But I'm going to invite it in a way that continues to not displace long-term Oaklanders, that continues to kind of celebrate the secret sauce that makes Oakland, Oakland, and lifts up and makes shine what we love about our city. For me, that's our diversity, our arts and culture, our kind of gritty, blue-collar, industrial jobs, and being a great place for working families to live. I'm so proud to be an Oaklander. I think we Oaklanders are compassionate, we're creative, and I'll speak for myself, I can be a little scrappy when I need to be. That's something that your mayor needs to get some things done. And I'm really excited about serving as an example to other Oakland students about someone who was born and raised here, but who has gone out and studied what has worked in other cities. This city can deliver much better services by implementing things that have worked other places. This city can become a much safer city by implementing things that have been successful in other cities. I am ready to do that. I am really proud to be a Jayhawk, and thank you so much. I hope to have your first place vote tomorrow. Thank you.
Councilmember Rebecca Kaplan.
Thank you so much for your time and attention today, and yes, I'll take that courtesy minute. My name again is Rebecca Kaplan, and I would be incredibly honored to be your mayor. One of the things that people sometimes ask me is, with the whole range of problems that Oakland has, how will you solve them all? And I think it's important that we sometimes look at them together. We have a pothole problem, and we have an unemployment problem. So you might think we need a pothole program and an unemployment program, but if you put a pothole problem and an unemployment problem together, it looks like you could have one solution. And one of the things I've been working to do on the Oakland City Council is bring in more money to fix our potholes, fix broken sidewalks, and there's now millions sitting in the bank that haven't been spent that could be used for that purpose. I will work to greatly expand our infrastructure repair and pair that with a local hiring program so that we will dramatically drive down unemployment at the same time. Now, I give that as an example of a win-win solution. I want to give an example of one I've already done. We recently had a big debate about how to handle garbage and compost and recyclables in the city of Oakland. And one of the things I fought for in that discussion is a program called Civic Corps that used to be called East Bay Conservation Corps that collects food waste and transports it to a local green energy digester. So food waste, instead of creating methane and global warming, instead creates green energy and local economic opportunity. And they hire local young people, including people who've had a run-in with the law, and they give them job training and a GED and paid work. And unlike our prison system with an 80% failure rate, this program has an 80% success rate, turning people's lives around, getting them into jobs and careers. So it's a win-win-win-win. Environment, economic opportunity, local hire, and re-entry at the same time. That's the kind of vision we need to have throughout Oakland, bringing in strategies like, thank you, Brian, for mentioning the local hiring of police so that we get effective policing and strengthen community police relations. I'm honored to have the support of the nurses and firefighters and others. I'd be very honored to have your vote to be your mayor. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Brian Parker, you have 1.5 minutes.
So I'm gonna end with a little bit of a story, if that's okay. I was finishing the day canvassing out in deep East Oakland, a place called Sobrani Park. So it's one of the worst parts of our city. And I happened on two young women that were sitting by my car. I walk over to the car, and I think that they were afraid of another don't do drugs kind of speech. And I said, no, that's not what I'm here for. And I gave them my card, and I said, look, I'm running for mayor of Oakland. And I said, if there was something your city could do for you, what would that be? And one of these young women, who is about 20 years old, had a baby, looked up at me and said, I'd like a GED and a job. I think in a world where we measure ourselves, or should measure ourselves, by how we treat the least amongst us, we're not acquitting ourselves very well right now if that is the goal in life, of somebody to have a GED and a job. A basic education and a right to earn a living wage should be something that we supply to all Oaklanders. Being raised by a mom who's here, that went through the civil rights movement, I know that there's nothing that a community can't do when it bands together. Got two of your former Jayhawks on my staff here. I am delighted to be in front of you, and I'll give the clear message that I'm going to show up every day and work super hard to bring all parts of this city together. I hope you'll join the Chronicle and former State Senator Don Parada in casting me #1 on your ballot. Thank you very much for having me today.
Mayor Jean Kwan, who has an extra minute if you would like to use it, so up to 2.5 minutes.
I actually used my minute. I'd love to have it though. You know, being the mayor of Oakland has not been an easy job, but I would ask you to really look at the record and look at the record fairly in terms of what's been happening in the past and what's happening now. I really am the only person up here who has worked in every neighborhood in this city and over a long period of time. It's why if you look at my supporters, you'll see them from all parts of town. I am really the only person who's worked very hard in education. I know a lot of you care about that and work for young people at every level, from saving Head Start to working on new initiatives with young people for jobs. I'm going to talk about two quick other things. We didn't talk about affordable housing. That's one of the most important issues in the city right now, because if there's no affordable housing, we will not remain to be diverse. As mayor, I've built about 1,700 affordable housing units. That's a record number. And we now have about 10,000 new homes in the pipeline because I was able to get a Chinese investor into Brooklyn Basin when banks were not lending into Oakland. I've taken us through the recession, put the city in good shape, and I've taken on police reform as well as bringing down crime. And it's not an accident that's happening at the same time. I'm the first mayor to work with the judge. The monitor just gave us kudos. We're almost done. That's a very hard thing. We've been doing these hard things. I've taken them on. I've learned a lot. The city has real momentum. I'd like to be able to continue to do this job, and I'd like to ask for one of your 3 votes tomorrow. Thank you.
After Professor Tooman speaks, we'll hear a few words from Rob Lake. So, Professor Joe Tooman.
Thank you all for being here today. I know sometimes I might sound a little stern when I'm talking about these things, but I need you to understand that even though I'm smiling right now, this isn't a game. These are real issues. And the person you put into the mayor's office makes decisions and participates in a process equally with the city council and the city administrator that affects real people's lives. So while we might make light of some of this stuff, it really does matter. I want you to walk away today remembering about me that I will be narrowly focused on public safety and economic development. On the safety part of this, it is about staffing levels for the police department, not to create an arrest city, a police state, but rather to project the police presence, to encourage good choices and discourage bad choices. It'll be about investing in violence prevention programs that we write the contracts for so that we evaluate them by the outcome we're looking for, which is violence prevention. It will be also about dealing with poverty. Let me remind you, affordable housing, 1,700 units is a good start, but we need much, much more. It's about meaningful participation in the ways that I described with our educational system. With me, you're getting an educator. And it's also, of course, about sourcing jobs by encouraging more businesses to come here. The same businesses that don't come here right now because they fear our reputation for crime and they despair of a city that has a reputation for not being business friendly. I want you to know positively that these things can change, but you need the right person in office. And I'm offering myself to you today as that person. Please make me your first choice, and if not, I'm also honored to be your second or third choice. Thank you so much.
Wow, that was amazing. I'll be very brief. To the students, you guys were incredible. Thank you. The questions were perfect, they were tough, they were spot on, well done. Matt, this was amazing. Well done. And to the candidates, I'm going to make a request that is incredibly optimistic and incredibly naive, and that is this. You all clearly love this city. There can only be one mayor. You have incredible ideas, and my request is once one of you wins, the other 4 work really hard to support the person who wins. And then the second request is whatever you do in the next 4 years or 8 years, it's all geared to ensure that this student body population wants to come back and live and raise their family and send their kids to Head-Royce. Thank you. Thank you.
Have already been so generous with their time, but if I can ask a small favor, that you stay just 2 minutes with us to take pictures with our 4 student speakers, it would mean a lot to us, and we'd very much appreciate it. Thank you everyone for attending today. I have a couple of announcements, so don't run for the doors, please. With the close of this forum, we officially declare all confusion has been entirely cleared up. You now have all the information you need to vote tomorrow. To each candidate, I extend my very sincere hope that you are victorious tomorrow. Let's give all the attendees a big hand for attending today and sharing their views. The students have only about 20 minutes left in their lunchtime, I think. Is there any adjustment to that schedule?